Assalamu alaikum. This is Megan Wyatt answering your question here at About Islam. Thank you so much for reaching out with your question, and I hope that this just offers you some perspective and things to think on that'll guide you as you make your decision. So the way I understood your question is that you were in a very abusive marriage for about a year and a half, and alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to hear you were able to get out of the abuse and no longer have to deal with that. However, you're really attached to your former in-laws, and you've described that you have a really good relationship with your former mother-in-law. And she's told you a lot of stories about your brother-in-law to the extent now that you feel you are attracted to him, you have an emotional attachment to at least the things she's told you about him, and you're wondering if there's any possibility for you to pursue your former brother-in-law for a husband in the future. So in terms of whether or not this is haram, technically, no, it's not. That's one of the reasons why when you are married, the brother-in-law is not considered mahram and never is mahram, because in theory, somewhere down the road, even if a woman was to get divorced, that individual technically could marry, that previous sister-in-law that they had, because you're not related by blood or anything like that. So unlike a father-in-law, for example, once a father-in-law has been a father-in-law to a woman, even if his son was to divorce his daughter-in-law, they remain mahram to each other and they're not ever allowed to have any relations with each other. But the brother-in-law is a different situation. So technically, is it haram to think that way? As far as I know, the answer is no. The question is it wise for you to pursue this path? Obviously, you love his parents, and that part's already done for you. They care about you. They love you. You have a great relationship. You talk to your former mother-in-law often. And, your ex-husband was just kind of, the exception to what seems like an otherwise really nice family. He has mental health struggles that, he wasn't able to overcome or work through in the process of being married to you. And as a result, you had to leave in order to save yourself from a really abusive situation. And so maybe the brother-in-law is not like that. The question is it feasible for you to consider marrying your former brother-in-law, who you said it's not like anything haram happened. You never really saw him. It's not like a relationship developed between the two of you or anything like that. It's just that through the mere presence of his existence and getting to know a lot about him through his mother, you feel like maybe this is the right person. Maybe he's a suitable match for you where his brother was not. Do you think that if you were to even approach this conversation, do you even think that that's something, first of all, that his parents would even accept the idea of? Do you think that they would be supportive of that idea? And also, knowing that you are single, knowing how much they care about you, knowing how much they love you, do you think that if they thought that their other son was a suitable match for you, that they would have perhaps suggested the idea itself? Or maybe that your former brother-in-law, who is now basically just a single available man, according to Islam, wouldn't have already perhaps pursued the idea. Now, there's a couple ways to look at this. Maybe no, because just like you're thinking this is super inappropriate, well, maybe they feel the same way. That's inappropriate. We don't do things like that. It would look bad in front of others. People might assume that something happened or occurred between the two of you. I can see how there's a lot of different sort of angles where people would worry about this being appropriate. And so that's why it's maybe not so much a question of is it halal as much as is it wise. The second thing I want you to think about is that your ex-husband would always be on the periphery. An abusive man is not a stable man, right? So he can't be trusted. Would he stay out of your life completely? Would he try to meddle in your affairs at all? Would he cause problems for his brother if that was the path he was on? Would he cause problems for you specifically? Would you want to be married into a family where if you were to have kids, well, your kid's uncle is your ex-abusive husband? Thinking about things outside of sort of the emotional realm and kind of thinking about it practically would really help you make some decisions. And of course, I don't know what your answer to that is, but these are really important things to think about because he's never going to be completely away from your life if you stay a part of that family. Whereas right now, you have a choice to continue the relationship with his parents or not. Like you could move states, countries, go to Mars if you wanted, start fresh. You don't have to have a relationship with them. You're choosing it. But if you marry back into that family, you don't get to cut him out entirely. He has a right to show up at family gatherings. He has a right to, connect with his brother, and depending on your level of comfort, who decides the limitations if you were to have children, that he gets to be their uncle. It's complicated. So you have to think carefully, what do you want to sign yourself up for? Or is it time for you to close the door, to go and pursue another family where you could also have in-laws who love you to pieces, who treat you well, who bring you into the family, who care about you, and also another man who doesn't come with baggage so directly attached to him? Those are really important questions for you to ask. So 1, do you even think that that's something the family would accept? 2, is that something you think the brother-in-law would even be open to? Or maybe it's a little bit weird for him to think about marrying his brother's ex-wife, and maybe that's really uncomfortable for them, whether that's because of shallow reasons, what will people think, what people say, or because of personal family principles. It's hard to say, but you really have to think through what the outcome of this might be. And 3rd, the idea of your ex-husband always being on the periphery, always being involved in your life in some way, and you never really being able to get away from him completely. And the last point to consider is, if you do pursue having this conversation, there is a chance you do lose entirely out on your relationship with your ex-in-laws. There is a chance that because of that, that creates a lot of discomfort for your mother-in-law. And at that point, she would recognize she's made a mistake in talking to you so much about the single available son, especially at a time when you've been heartbroken, when you've had to go through divorce, when you've had to go through so much. And at that point, she might distance herself from you. Are you prepared to lose that relationship the way that it is if you bring up the subject? So there isn't really a clear-cut answer for you. It comes back to what's wise in this situation and what it is you're willing to risk, what it is you're willing to risk losing. And of course, there's always a question of what do you risk gaining? And so you've got to decide what set of risks you're comfortable with, what set of risks you can accept the outcome of. All right. So I already know that you're a strong person because you got yourself out of that abusive relationship. I know that that means that you honor yourself and you care for yourself and you're in a position to look out for your best interest. But you may want to slow down a little bit and really heavily consider what you want your life to look like and how many different options are there to pursue that. So this is one, but have you also considered just opening yourself up again when you're ready to talking to other people for marriage, to having other conversations with other single men and finding out where that goes or how you feel? It's a possibility you're just so close to this family that you've divorced the husband, but you haven't divorced the family yet. So I hope this gives you some things to consider. I'd really like to hear back from you so that I can support you whichever way you decide to go, and just sort of in risk assessment, really thinking clearly about what you want and what you deserve in your life, and being able to make a wise decision moving forward that really honors your life values, your vision for your life, your level of happiness, and what you really, really want to fight for in your life right now. So you can reach out to me through About Islam. Again, you can find me on Facebook, whatever you want. I would just love to hear from you and see how these different perspectives are shaping your decision. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.